Welcome to the Inside Circle podcast, where your host, Eldra Jackson III, and his guests get personal about prison and transformation in all of its forms.
I keep reminding myself that I've got the key, and I'm the only one who can set me free.
This is Inside Circle, where your truth will set you free.
Welcome, folks, to another episode of the Inside Circle podcast. And today we have with us Justin Smith. Justin grew up poor in the 1980s in a wealthy, status-driven East Coast suburb. Shortly before Justin was born, his father entered a manic-depressive cycle from which he would find no escape in this life. As early as he can remember, Justin has been interested in finding better ways to help people get less defeated by unhelpful negative emotions. After earning a law degree and working in law and finance, Justin has spent most of the last decade studying the challenge of emotional and spiritual progress and refining a tool that he believes can make such progress feel less impossible. Well, greetings, Justin, and how in the hell are you doing today?
Couldn't be better. It's really nice to see you again, and it's really nice to have this opportunity to talk with you.
Okay. It's great to be sitting with you today and speaking. So why don't we start off with you talking a little bit about your childhood and how you were raised? Because, you know, in the opening, I read a little bit about you growing up in a wealthy, status-driven East Coast suburb and some things with your father. Why don't you, if you're open to it, share a little bit more about that, please, sir?
Yeah, 100%. I'd love to. Thank you. I think it's really formative of kind of my interest in this project and kind of what I pursued throughout my life. But that is, I was the last born child of, last of three boys, well, four boys, but one died right before I was born. And that kind of pitched my dad, who had been very successful all his life, into a manic depressive cycle, as he said, as you read in the bio, from which he never recovered. And so that was basically the experience that I was kind of born into. And I would say by disposition, like a highly empathetic person, I couldn't help but feel emotion. And of course, when you're a little kid and highly empathetic, you kind of could feel it, but you don't have much way of kind of processing it because you're new to the world. You don't have the skills, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew things were kind of out of control. And, as I got older, I just thought and I also had the sense, because my dad couldn't really make any money after that because he couldn't really hold down jobs. He'd been highly successful up to that point, really genius level in a number of categories. And so, I also had the spotlight of thinking, well, everyone in this town is, all about money and has a ton of it. And we don't. And being empathetic in that way, I was just like, I stand out. I don't want to be noticed. I kind of just want to be quiet and kind of just see what's going on here, kind of figure out the situation. As I got older, I thought I was pretty logical and rational. And, I think that was probably also in nature, but also like, how do I figure out a way out of this situation? And so I tried to help my dad both on the, depressed side, but more on the manic side, try to figure out how to, fight back against it. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to figure out how to do that. And we couldn't find any good doctors. It's just a tough illness, it just really is. But I got to see an exaggerated view of somebody in the grip of something, very dramatically, and from which they could not control themselves. And later in life, I had a buddy who entered AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he went from his life completely out of control into, really becoming higher character, more decent, like growths, like becoming a better person. And so I told my dad was still around at that point, and I said, well, maybe we should find some sort of similar group for you. And he kind of was resistant. And I didn't blame him entirely. It was just difficult to find, like high caliber people that really, he was going to connect to and really find that relation to. So anyway, he died without kind of making any recovery from that. And I think, I'm sure that weighed on him, quite a lot, that he wasn't able to really provide for his family. My mother stuck around. She couldn't have been a more loving and like loyal wife, took her vows incredibly seriously. And that gave me also the experience of seeing that, like, no matter how much you care about somebody and how much you love them, they have to pull themselves out. You can't love them out of their downward cycle. And so, yeah, those were both really valuable lessons. As I kind of like thought about what I wanted to do in life, I had three things that experience really kind of produced in me. One was I got access to seeing kind of all these wealthy people in my hometown, and I didn't really aspire to that. I thought their lives were pretty superficial, quite ordinary, and I just was like, I'm not interested in this. I don't want to give my life up for this. And then two was, is there a way that people like my parents, me when I was a child, don't have to be so alone in this? And then three, as I studied that question more, I just thought, wow, everyone is in some form of this, some form of negative emotion really impacting their life in a unideal, at the most minimum, but many times highly destructive way. And how do we, including myself, is there a way to sort of alleviate that? And those were kind of like the problem set that I latched onto. And, over time I pursued.
Yeah. And now, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your willingness to share that. And in hearing all of that, I wonder what effect did that have on you being so young and seeing an adult around you being gripped in that? How did that impact you?
I would think a lot of ways, in like every possible way. Things that stand out to me were, I think I just seized up a bit, like as much as I was absorbing everything I possibly could because that was my nature, I think I just kind of got tight and was just like, stay in the center of the boat type of thing, And then the other thing I think it did to me, my father was a real character, like larger than life personality. And you can only imagine what happens with that personality when they're supermania, And so in many ways, my father is kind of out of control as he was, especially when I was younger and kind of didn't understand exactly what was going on. I was just like, oh, he's in a bigger mood. He's able to kind of dominate any room. He's able to have fun. He gets limos. Just everything's kind of fully on. And I'm just like, as a little boy, that's kind of heroic. And I was just like, I want to develop into that type of an adult, like an adult that's not like everyone else and that can kind of run the show. And then as I got older, I think it just made me feel like, okay, I want to dive as deep into the question of what this experience is and how we can make it better for each other as possible. And I think it also, even though, I was raised a Catholic and I found that not to be like a really robust kind of, emotional experience, I was very drawn to the story of Jesus. I was just like, he didn't like phonies. He really wanted people to take care of each other. And, he really liked the outcasts. And I felt like our family was a bit of like an outcast, like high quality people, high character, cared about each other, all the rest of it. And there was an absence of that, as far as I could tell, in our town, which was very materialistic and, as I said, status driven.
Yeah.
So I think across the board, I just had a ton of, and just wanted to have my life have some importance, have some meaning and figure things out that could help people.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, as you were going through that, as you were experiencing that and thinking the thoughts that you were thinking and coming up with the things, that a young person, and how old were you at this time that you can remember?
I remember coming home from nursery school and realizing things were out of control. That was like a very distinct memory. And so I'm sure I was feeling it beforehand, but I was just like crystallized. My grandfather picked me up. My oldest brother had broken his leg on skiing vacation. And I just had the sense that things are out of control.
Yeah. Yeah. Where was your mother when this was going on?
She was there, as I said, she stuck by him and was just trying. She didn't have the ability, she was of a generation, I think she graduated college in like 1962 or something like that.
Yeah.
So she's of that earlier, kind of madman generation. A wife was considered to be, and she was happy to be a homemaker and mother, and so even if she had wanted to go out, she tortures herself in hindsight that, oh, I should have been able to, support the family, blah, blah, blah. But she's trying to do the best thing that she thinks she can do, which is get my dad back into some sort of shape to get back out there.
Yeah.
And so she's trying to hold down the family as well as possible while holding on a man who's severely manic depressive.
Yeah. And so how did that play out as you grew up, as you got older, as you go into high school, as you go into college and you go out into the world? What did you take from that out into your world?
Yeah, I just took into account that, I think I was disappointed with the world, honestly. I think I was just disappointed with the nature of the game. And that created a little bit of anger in me. I think it created at times when I was too excessive in my drinking. I think it often created in me a desire to kind of push people out on a night to try to figure out, again, like what's going on. Okay, I kind of know the story in my family, but is this actually replicating itself And oftentimes, especially once you're college age, it's like when people are a little bit more wasted, whether they smoke a little bit or drink, that you can get something honest out of them. In the regular world, most people are kind of uptight and just talking about regular stuff.
Mhm.
So the opportunity to delve into the spiritual, I found, happened at those times where people were more open because they're socializing and catching a buzz.
Yeah.
So, and that also is a slippery slope because oftentimes people don't want you to pry into what you see about them. And I was pretty good at seeing things about people. And so it would often end in kind of like some awkwardness,
Yeah. Yeah.
right intentions. I'm trying to like figure out how we can help each other.
Yeah. And you mentioned, delving off into the spiritual realm. Can you speak more about that and what got you onto that path?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think for my childhood, I really wanted to help people like not be in such pain, not be trapped with it.
Yeah.
And so I came up with done a startup earlier that was kind of support the troop related. And, I enjoyed startups generally. I thought they were an effective way for this is before they were super popular, not as wild about the startup culture today as it was back then. It seemed like more people that were really kind of off the beaten track people were starting startups. And now it's kind of the thing to do. So, but I thought of a bunch of different kind of crappy ideas for how people could do this, how they could help each other feel a little less bad. And, and then I stumbled on one that hopefully we'll talk about in a little bit, but it struck me that like I started to think about, can it work? And as I did, I sort of expanded my view and my terms and my definitions into this is really a project to help with people's spirit or emotion. I don't pick the word you prefer.
Mhm.
To me, they're both basically the same, how you feel about yourself in reality. And so that kind of blended into me, that psychology, how you feel about yourself, avoiding pain is very much a spiritual question. It's the internal question about how you feel about yourself in reality.
Yeah. So speak more about the project you're working on now.
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, I stumbled on the idea. It's based on very kind of like first principles. And so the basic idea is that, humans come into the world and we have two main challenges. We have the challenge of staying alive and we have the challenge of feeling decent about ourselves in the experience. And as I thought more about it, I was like, humans are not equipped to face either well, like to make progress on either on their own. You know, if each of us had to figure out everything for the physical world about building things, about hunting animals, about farming, we would be still in the sticks. And in the physical world, there's a very easy way for people to collaborate. They either show each other or they can reverse engineer stuff that other people do. In the spiritual realm, it's very difficult to actually collaborate, to see something honest about what other people are experiencing. And so if you look at from just kind of like a meta level, like, well, what are we up against? Negative emotion is like, if you think about it, it's like a conscious enemy that wants to stop you. What you'll figure out in very short order is it's very, very powerful and relentless. And so we're up against a competitor in negative emotion or our vulnerability to it, however you want to think about it, that we're not really in a fair fight. And we haven't figured out enough effective ways to collaborate against this and make progress against this force because there are so many impediments. People feel like they're being a burden when they do it individually. People in groups very quickly start performing. Everyone cares about how other people see them. The most difficult problems you're not sure you can make progress against. The list goes on and on. And so the idea that our team developed is a 3-part idea. You talk to yourself or your God. You try to figure out anything that can help you basically feel decent about yourself, do the things that allow you to feel decent about yourself, kind of like a problem solving exercise. How do I feel? Why? How can I make it feel a little bit better?
Mm-hmm.
The second experience is a one-on-one experience called spiritual hitchhiking. And if you choose to share it, like make it available, which is the default, you can pick, I don't want to share this, it's too personal, whatever else. You can do that as many times as you want. But the default is let one other person who you don't know hear kind of what you're going through or how you try to get through it. When you do that, you get the same thing back from that. And you can choose, both people could choose either their first 3 minutes of what they said or their last 3 minutes. So if you say, my first 3 minutes were too personal, choose the last 3 minutes. That's totally fine. And you get out of your own head. You get to hear what somebody else is going through, how they go through it. And then if you both choose, you can send each other a single text message. And there's a ton of benefits to that experience that we can come back to. But then the third experience is a communal experience. And that's where everyone, whether you've ever recorded anything or not, 3 times a week gets to hear how one person tried to experience reality and tried to get through it. Something honest about that, right? And so my contention is in the regular world, and especially in the online world, everyone's seeking credit. Everyone wants to be known as the genius, the hot person, the this, the that. It's like it's all performance. And so as much as that there is available online, there's nowhere to get something honest that's kind of like that has the chance of being emotionally uplifting or edifying. And so that's what we're able to create, because when the person recorded it, the main purpose you do this is for yourself. You get to know yourself over time. You get to get greater control of yourself over time. The danger with that is anytime you do that, you're going to run into negative emotions, things that you don't like about yourself or this reality that bring you down. Negative emotions, as we talked about, is a super, super powerful force. It warps your ability to see reality, very easily to fall into a bad cycle, very difficult to get out. People tend to isolate, ultimately leads to destructive behavior. So you're putting yourself, when you face it on your own, in danger of tripping into this negative state. What minimizes that risk, that looking at your life will make you less capable of facing it or navigating it, is that you don't do it by yourself. But again, in the regular world, it's very difficult to not have people be performatively annoying, feel like a burden, whatever else. It's a heavy experience. And so here, if you do it for yourself and you get to, it's not a direct experience. We experience each other indirectly. So there's no awkwardness. There's no, hey, do you want to get coffee? And you're like, I don't want to get coffee with this guy. So you get inside somebody else's mind as close as you can to get inside somebody else's in mind. And what that gives you is some perspective. Oh, here's another person being too hard on themselves. I wish they wouldn't be too hard on themselves. Over time, this is how like humans learn. We're pattern matching machines. So all of the things that it's very easy to forget, which is really everything in the emotional challenge, we get more constant reminders of. You hear somebody, how do they express gratitude? How do they say, oh, they remember to do it? And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. It's good to like feel gratitude. It's like so easy to forget that when you're in like a negative state. Or, how they pray or otherwise connect to a higher power. I've never been in a room where somebody else is praying unless they know I'm there. And then therefore I believe I'm affecting how they pray. Here, it's like, it's just basic logic. If you heard 20 different people of your faith, of different faiths pray, you'd have a little bit more comfort, things you like, things you don't like, about how to do this yourself, and establishing some closer connection to, a being that you believe is aligned with your long-term well-being is so valuable. It's so valuable. And like, for me personally, like, if I could hear to you guys and how you kind of get your spiritual house in order, your emotional house in order at the end of the day through prayer or otherwise, I'm just like, I'm going to learn a tremendous amount. It's going to be really beneficial for me. Same thing with somebody who's been in AA, who's like really tapped into the right part of that Alcoholics Anonymous, who's tapped into the right part of that program. They have spiritual muscles because they work them every day. Like watching a great rock climber, it's like any other activity in human existence. Like, all this stuff as well as I do. Being honest with yourself is not like a binary black and white issue. It sounds slippery to say, but the reality is being honest with yourself is a skill. There's a way you can bury yourself with honesty. Oh, I'm awful because of X, Y, and Z. Of course, everyone feels that way and there's truth to it. But how do you do it productively? How do you do it productively if you don't want this negative force to be the dominant force in your life?
Yeah.
And when you get stuck with something negative and you feel like I might never find my way out of this, it drives contraction. I mean, you said at the end of your last podcast, your solo podcast, you're traveling the country throughout 2025 and there's all this fear, and I would say it's fairly righteous fear. We're living in a very transitionary time. There's lots of negative emotion that's been building for a long time. I challenge people, like, when's the last time the United States has been in like a quote unquote normal period where things didn't feel, what do you think?
Well, I think a lot of things, and what I'm hearing in the platform that you just described, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it is an opportunity for folks to engage with one another indirectly. I get the opportunity, hey, I log on and I'm going through something, and I'm using the platform like a diary.
100%.
And I'm going in and I'm putting my thoughts down, and then I have the opportunity to go back and say, this is what I'm comfortable with sharing, and this is what I'm not comfortable with sharing. It's kind of open source for others to hear. and engage with. They're not
Yes,
engaging with me directly. They're getting the opportunity to, for lack of a better term, read my diary. And
exactly.
perhaps there'll be something in that that they can identify with.
Yeah,
And then if
yeah.
we so choose to interact and we're open to that, then we can send one another a message after that. That's kind of how if I condense it down, that's how I receive that.
1,000%. And yeah, I'll just say a couple of the benefits that I think come along with that, because I don't think they're immediately obvious.
Mhm.
But one is, it's like as necessary as it is to focus inward and to look at your life. Like if you look too deeply, there's danger in that too. Nietzsche has that quote, like, beware of, gazing into the abyss. If you gaze too long, the abyss gazes back, the darkness comes back. And so I think having the opportunity to look at somebody else's consciousness as honestly and purely as possible is like a really great break from yourself. You don't want to constantly be thinking, I, Justin, am X, Y, and Z, and how's my day is just as crappy as it was yesterday, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, there's somebody else out there. Secondly, it's just like really good, especially in the time we're living in, to not dislike people and to have an experience like, from what you do in your sessions, which is incredible. But it's like when you experience something honest about somebody else, there's a potential for something magic to happen.
Yeah.
Not always, but like if you sense that they're trying to get better, and then the feeling you have that not all, which is very easy to have in our society, that everyone's kind of out for themselves. Everyone's all about money. Everyone's all about their own status or power. Look at how great we are. And so it's like that gets a person easily jaded, and it's easy to feel that way, especially if you watch the news. I mean, the political division, all the rest of it. And I think in terms of like things you can do that are good for the psychology of another human being, giving somebody a generous act, giving the poor a coat, all the rest of it, that's obviously awesome beyond belief, right? But at the same time, it creates this obligation. Here's the rich person with all the assets, and here's the poor person that needs stuff. Poor person's screwed up a bunch of times. They're getting a jacket. They'll probably screw this up too. Like all these things play in the poor person's head. Like, yes, it's nice to know there's somebody good, but at the same time, I'm not sure that I'm going to change. So like, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or you're literally like a drug addict on the street who happens to have a phone. We are all going through this very, very difficult experience. And when the drug addict who's on the street or the person who's been in their parents' basement for years and doesn't want to leave and feels uptight about anyone asking them, what have they been up to? They can feel like they know something about another person that no one else is likely to know, that they have someone else to care about. They get their minds off themselves, and they have the feeling that caring can actually matter. Again, we can learn from each other's mistakes. It doesn't have to be all brilliant stuff. We can learn from just seeing something honest. Honesty is the key, not wisdom. If wisdom was the key, we've been fortunate to have some great preachers and, really sophisticated and talented, emotional, spiritual people in this world, but that's not moving the needle. And so as AA knows, getting honest and being connected in a way that works, in a way that's non-awkward, in a way that's repeatable, is really at the bedrock of this formula, because it allows so many other good things to flow that otherwise hit some sort of wall ultimately, because it's a fine one-time experience, but I don't want to do it. This is a daily problem. We are attacked daily by all sorts of negative emotion from the environment and from ourselves. And just like it's helpful to exercise or stretch or whatever else, it's like if everyone had to be in their own box when they went to the gym and you couldn't see how anyone else worked out, we would be way back in terms of making physical progress. It's like you go into the gym, you learn from each other. You get a little bit of motivation because you see somebody else is trying. And the same thing holds true. It's like you hear somebody, whether it's the communal experience or spiritual hitchhiking, the one-on-one experience, you hear somebody who's going through a ton of crap and they're keeping going. And then you think, you know what? At least from my experience in doing it, every time I hear somebody decent, and even if they're going through not even tough stuff, but they're just kind of figuring stuff out and laughing. It doesn't have to be serious stuff. I laugh at myself so much. It's like fun. It's like learning about yourself. I think the most valuable person that people can tell their story to is themselves. It's like you tell it time and time again. It's like water on a rock type thing. You figure things out. So I just think it's when I get paired up with somebody else, I want to be in a position to help people because I'm reminded there are good people in the world. And when I see somebody else trying to go in a direction, I'm just like, you know what? That's the direction you want to go. I can feel it. And so I think this is the final thing I'll say and then pass back to you. But I think a lot of people feel like I've tried so many different things. Like I've read self-help books, it works for a week or so or whatever. And so what the subconscious starts to believe is that this isn't really possible. It's not going to get that great. That might be better for a week or two, but I'm going to come back down to earth. And so I ought to concentrate and put my time and focus on the things that really can move the needle. I don't have money. Good luck feeling greater peace. You must be the greatest. You have to be the greatest guru in the world, and especially in the United States of America in 2026. So, okay, so I should focus on my career, making money and making sure, especially if I want to have a family, especially in a world that's getting this crazy this quickly, that we have as many assets as possible and as much cushion, because who the hell knows whether there's going to be jobs for my kid in 20 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's natural for people to be more nervous, uptight, fearful, as you said, and therefore contract, as you said, and therefore be acquisitive when they have the opportunity. This is like the most anti-Christian society. And again, it's anti every good religion. It's anti-Buddhism, it's anti-Judaism, it's anti-Muslimism, it's anti-everything good. It's like, it's creating all of this pressure. So I think what we need to do is to just start running experiments. And, I don't think this is the end all be all. And I think, like this is a great compliment on a daily basis for programs like yours, where you get people who might otherwise be scared, or be comfortable, whatever, and to come into an environment and be taken through by, really, as I said to you, it's like, I think it's very rare for people to do what you do in terms of those groups where people are making emotional and spiritual growth in a very intense and profound way. I think those are very difficult to pull off unless you have really, really gifted facilitators. And I was lucky enough to come to that one in San Francisco and, just amazed. Each one of the guys, and Ari in your early episodes said like you and your magicians. It's like, you guys are magicians. And so I think the combination of like getting people in a place where they don't have to leave their house, they don't have to do anything, they can do it every day. Sometimes, a terrible thing happens to you and there's no one to talk to.
Yeah.
It's, whatever time zone you're in or whatever else. Most people at that point, when they're really tense, don't want to sit down, and they don't have the discipline or the habit of writing in a diary. And so, but we all have our phone all the time. Open the app, hit a button, and then, yes, you could make a strong argument. Hey, if I just did this on my own, I have to worry about anybody hearing me, whatever else. It's like, that's probably true, but maybe it's not, because when you're down, there are these benefits that are not immediately obvious. And secondly, it's like, we have to figure out ways to care about each other more, especially going into the environment which we're going to, which is becoming increasingly competitive. And if it wasn't like, I don't know how it's not a canary in the coal mine the size of like, skyscraper, but if you look at the emotional health statistics of young people, the people who see the society that they're coming into, they have the most interest in figuring out what they're coming into. And they're depressed, 1 in 5 consider suicide, if you believe the CDC, which is a crazy 1 in 10 attempt suicide a year. It's like, those are crazy statistics, and they're a real spike. And it's a statement. I don't believe they're irrational. If you look at the world that they are coming into in terms of opportunity and risk, downside risk of displacement by robots and, AI, it's a wild time. And so we ought to be really, unless we're recklessly destructive beyond belief, we ought to be running experiments. And one final thing I'll say, but even if everything blows up, which it very likely could, either in your own personal life or in the life of the society that you're a part of, you'll feel a lot better if you tried with an effort that you don't feel disgraceful about. If you see a problem coming and you don't do anything and that things go sideways, then you spike the ball on your own head, because you say, it didn't have to be this way. It's happened. It's totally tragic. Oh, and I'm partially or fully to blame. Like that's how unhelpful negative emotion gets a triple win. It just beats the heck out of you. And so, when I started this, I thought like, we probably want to get people to at least 50.1% peaceful, as opposed to, the battle between negative emotion and peace in terms of the emotional spiritual challenge. And the longer I've thought about it, the more I think like, we have to think about it as depriving negative emotion as like any amount of win possible, like deny it its biggest win. So if we can just like, that's victory, that's how we make progress. And so it's not a greater peace app. It's just like, it's less negative emotion app.
So what is the name of the app?
The name of the app is called This Life. And, just kind of like, you get a life. What are you going to do with this one? Maybe we get another, but what are you going to do with this life?
And where can folks find it at?
It's only on the App Store right now. We're going to do an Android version, but in the App Store, it's This Life, an experiment.
Mhm.
And you can download it also from our URL, which is jointhislife.com.
Okay.
And there's a sign up form there for people on Android to put in their email. And we hope to have that within a month or so and, and get everyone involved. Just like it's, some issue, it's like a finances issue. And if anyone wants to join, work, volunteer, participate, we want to make this as open as possible. Obviously super talented people who are committed to the cause. And I hope to, get folks either who are formerly incarcerated or, in your group, inside or outside circle. And just I think if they're cool with it, pass that material to you. And if you had any interest in it, I just think it's really useful to see something honest about how people experience reality.
Yeah. So I've got one more question for you before we wrap. If you are open to it, get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And feel the years begin to slip away with this next breath. See yourself in college. See yourself in high school. See yourself in grade school. And see that young child coming home from nursery school. And with the wisdom that you possess in your spirit and body today, what would you bestow upon that young person?
Yeah, thanks. Not enough, but what I would just bestow upon them is just be a kid.
Yeah.
Be a kid. There's never going to be a better time to be silly. And being silly with other human beings is a really, really worthwhile experience if you're going to go around, And so you're not going to be able to help but experience and absorb some of this. That's just who you are. Don't try to fight it, but just be silly and don't think that everything is always, on the potential of disaster.
Yeah.
And don't worry what other people think about you so much, that's just always cool advice. It's just relax and don't worry about what other people think. Just, be silly and have fun.
Yeah.
That's what I have right now.
Yeah. That's great wisdom for a child. Just be a kid, relax, be a kid. Well, thank you,
Amen.
Justin. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. And I wish you well with the app.
God bless, Eldra. I wish you, well with everything you're doing, and thank you for doing it. It's remarkable.
Thank you, sir.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, folks, for listening to another episode of the Inside Circle podcast. And if you like what you've heard here, and if you believe in the work that it is that we're doing in this world, this podcast is just a small sample of some of the work that we're doing in the world, trying to get out and create spaces where folks can find their own personal freedom. And it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost spiritually, it comes at a cost mentally, it comes at a cost emotionally, and the easy cost is financially. So if you've listened to us, over the last couple of years, and you've heard some things that have touched your heart, become a member, support Inside Circle. And it's very easy to become a member and support by becoming a recurring donor. So come on, jump on, become a part of the Inside Circle family, and become a recurring donor. It doesn't take a whole lot, but every little bit counts. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Inside Circle podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a comment on iTunes or wherever you listen. Follow us on Instagram at inside_circle and on Facebook at InsideCircle.org, all one word. Special thanks to the songwriter Rob Ricardo for his song, The Work. Join our mailing list and learn more about Inside Circle on our website, at insidecircle.org. And remember, your truth will set you free.